We now need to understand another type of qualitative data analysis, which is discourse analysis. This is a bit interesting, and it's utilized in different types of studies. It might be linguistics, it might be political studies, it might be policy studies. It's widely used in different studies. But what is discourse analysis? Discourse analysis examines how language is used in texts and contexts, focusing on the ways in which language constructs social realities and power relations. It analyzes both the content and the structure of communication. So in discourse analysis, there are also 4 critical steps that if you master them, if you understand them, it will help you in developing or in utilizing discourse analysis in your study in the event that you are using discourse analysis. The first step is text selection. The second step is context consideration. The third step is language analysis. And the fourth step is interpretation. Now that we have understood that there are 4 steps in discourse analysis, let's get to understand each and every step. With text selection, you are choosing the texts or discourses to be analyzed. So this is obviously the first critical step that you need to do, having your relevant data or having compiled your relevant data. You need to choose the text and the discourse you intend to analyze. So obviously these are guided by objectives or your research questions. They help you to select which kind of text am I going to involve, what exactly am I looking at, what kind of discourse do I need to understand. And then the second step is context consideration, understanding the social, cultural, and historical context of the discourse. Obviously, in this case, the critical aspects is to establish which social group am I looking at, and which cultural focus is my study engaging. And if it's a historical, if it is a historical context, you also need to establish which time period am I looking at, because one of the critical aspects is that discourses evolve and discourses might differ depending on the social environment, depending on the cultural environment, and depending on the historical time period. In any case, if it happens that there were political speeches that were made during the apartheid, those political speeches might have a similar tone or might have a similar discourse. But also you need to understand that if it's political speeches made during apartheid, were they made by the government or were they made by the revolutionary organizations? So obviously if they were made by the government, you find that they have a particular narrative that they were trying to push, and while the revolutionary parties like the ANC and other organizations were pushing a particular narrative. So that's very important for you to establish, because each and every context brings out a different discourse altogether. So it's crucial for you to establish and consider which context am I looking at, because that helps to shape the discourse you want to analyze. And then the third aspect is the language analysis. In language analysis, you are analyzing the language, including vocabulary, grammar, and the rhetorical devices that might have been used or that might be used in a particular speech or in a particular presentation that you are analyzing, or even in a particular policy document. What are the kind of words which are being used? What are the kinds of narratives, or what are the kinds of rhetoric being used? If you are to understand maybe what would have been the kind of a language or the kind of discourse which was being used either during apartheid or being used by Hitler in his campaigns and all kinds of things. So those propaganda or that kind of language, that kind of vocabulary, that kind of grammar, is very crucial to understand what kind of discourse was being pushed or what kind of ideas were being presented. So that's the whole purpose of the language analysis. You need to look at how certain information was disseminated, what kind of words, how were the words presented, the grammatical format, the rhetorical information that was being brought out. So this helps you to get to the interpretation, which is the fourth aspect, whereby you are interpreting how language constructs and meanings and the power dynamics in those language constructs. The power dynamics are being played in the information that was being disseminated. So just one critical example that I've been using all along is that whenever you are engaging in a discourse analysis of political speeches, what you need to understand is explore how politicians are using the language to frame the policy issues, to persuade their audience, and to assert their authority. So this is very important, because obviously the way a dictator can present or can frame their policy issues, persuade their audiences, and assert their authority is different from a presidential candidate, or from a president, or from any politician who is a Democrat. So there are two different discourses that are presented there. So it's very crucial for you to understand what discourse analysis is all about, and how can you utilize it in your study, depending on whether you are doing political studies, linguistics, policy studies, and so forth. This takes us to the next type of qualitative analysis that we are going to look at, which is the framework analysis. And this will be the last analysis we are looking at.